As a group, we decided for our topic to be The Fall of the Roman Empire by Amber Anderson, Megan Brady, and Roberto Bell. When and how? In 285, the empire split into the east and the west. They did this so that the emperors had less space to lead. This only caused trouble as the east would hate the west and the west would hate the east, as they were both fighting over power of the Roman Empire. There were about 8 main reasons for the fall. The fall of the Roman Empire happened in 476 AD, and people go back and forth on the main causes of why and how it fell. Many were upset with the fall of the Roman Empire, but others, like the poor people, were very excited because they were starving to death. The tax on everything would finally go away, and they would be able to afford things again. Here's a quote, and it says, "The term fall of Roman Empire usually refers to the fall of Western Roman Empire. Roman Empire was, for almost 500 years, the world's greatest superpower. Its eventually demise is attributed to a number of different reasons." And that quote is from History for Kids. Next, we are going to show a little clip that better explains the fall of the Roman Empire.
The rise of Rome is truly extraordinary. We look back on it from the perspective that it was ordained, that it was destined to happen. But in reality, it was a very small Greek city-state that rose to such great heights and achieved such enormous success, the world has never been the same.
In the middle of the 3rd century BC, Rome itself was very much on the up. It wasn't a massive world power. Rome's expansionism was driven by defensive considerations. They were protecting their own interests or protecting their allies, even if reality meant that they were attacking other people.
The military was central to Roman society. It undergirded everything that they did.
Rome conquered what we called at the time the known world, and Rome power grew based on fear.
When Rome conquered its enemy, it didn't just lead them to their own devices. It moved in. It set up systems. There were points of inclusion, there are points of suppression, and ultimately there's a system that really worked for Rome to remain in power.
Rome wants a number of things from the territories it conquers. It wants wealth, it wants glory, and it wants human capital. It wants slaves. By the 2nd and 1st centuries BC, Rome becomes the greatest slave society in the history of the ancient world. This is slavery on a massive scale, even we might say on an industrial scale. And it's affecting the lives of millions of people in the Mediterranean who are caught in the Romans' nets.
They ruled the Mediterranean with their galleys at that point. And so if you came into conflict with Rome, you could count on destruction.
In the 2nd century AD, Rome had reached its zenith, its greatest territorial extent. It was kind of like when a roller coaster gets to the very top of a rise and is about to go down the other side. You get this glorious moment of feeling like you're on top of everything, and you're almost unaware that terror is about to start. This happened, I think, to the Romans in the 2nd century. They were sitting on top of the world and weren't aware that in the 3rd century, everything was going to come apart.
You could say the Roman Empire's eyes are bigger than its stomach. It pushed really far out, and then it ended up with an empire which was too big to manage.
The first signs of the empire being torn apart from its very fabric is the crisis of the 3rd century. You've got revolts, you've got civil war, hyperinflation, and a string of useless emperors.
As the Roman Empire began to crumble and the territories that it had once controlled began to fall away from Roman power and fall into the hands of barbarians, they had to come to grips with the fact that they were no longer the only big player in this game, that they were slowly surrendering power to other people that they had to now treat as equals.
Rome was in some senses a victim of its own success. It had become such an incredible source of power and of wealth. It became a prize in an unending series of civil wars and political intrigues. which in the end brought about its collapse.
The cost of building the kind of imperial power Rome has in the Mediterranean world were enormous. The costs on Roman society were incalculable, and the bill had to be paid.
We're amazed that Rome lasted as long as it did, but the fact that it collapsed is not so much a sign that the Romans themselves were weak or had a bad idea in undertaking this project at all. It's more of a sign that empires are bound to go up and down, to rise and to fall.
Government and leadership. The government was so large that it was hard to govern with the established system, meaning that it was hard to keep rules intact and follow the guidelines. They didn't have a steady and reliable system, and that was a huge issue. Any general was allowed to kill the current imperator and take the new throne without any punishment, and this was something that happened a lot. At the times, the bodyguard of the imperator would auction off the imperator's life so that they could acquire more money or gold. With money super tight, this caused for cheaper soldiers to fight, meaning that they were less experienced and could not handle the task. This caused all civilians to lose trust in their system and overall turn their backs on them. The next topic I'm going to talk about is religion. Religion played a huge factor in the fall of the Roman Empire. A new religion, Christianity, was making a huge rise in the empire, and many had different feelings about it. Christianity was monotheistic, which caused many issues because it was completely out of the ordinary of the normal Roman religion that was polytheistic. Monotheistic means one God, while polytheistic means many gods. So they both worshipped a god, but the Romans worshipped many gods, while monotheistic, which is Christianity, just worshipped one god. After many years, Christianity became the main religion that everyone used around the entire eastern and western areas of the Roman Empire. Many also believe that the fall of the Roman Empire was planned so that Christianity could grow in a new city rather than an old one. So it's not like they're bringing in a new thing. They are starting fresh. The next topic is economic troubles. This was a big one that was very important. The army took most of the money that the government had. This caused for many people to have to pay taxes to fund the army and all the money that they needed. This meant that the taxes were higher than what they even were before. The resources that they had were spread very thin because of the reason that they had such a large empire. Everyone had to get equal amount. Inflation had a huge effect on the economic troubles. That was one of the main reasons for the cause of the Roman Empire, the fall. Inflation caused for higher prices, which made everything more expensive, especially adding on the tax that they were also having to pay. With all of this happening, the empire was also dealing with labor deficits. This caused Romans' economy to depend on slaves to do all of the work, such as fielding, being craftsmen, and they really had to be on their top game for this, or they would be in very big trouble. With all of these issues going on, it definitely did not help the empire at all in their success, in their trying to stop the fall of the Roman Empire.
Another reason for the decline of Rome was the rise of the Eastern Empire. In 2084, Emperor Diocletian ordered for the Roman Empire to split into two halves. He kept the eastern side for himself and gave the western side to his colleague Maximian. The Western Empire was in the city of Milan, while the Eastern Empire was in Constantinople. The East and West Empire had many conflicts, fighting over resources and military aid. The eastern side was stronger and became more powerful. Their strong military defense led barbarian invasions to the west, furthering the economic crisis for the western side. Eventually, the Western Empire crumbled completely. This map shows the distinct differences between the Western and Eastern Empire. The western side is highlighted in orange, while the western side is purple. The white boxes show the major cities with each empire and what they had control of. With the empire now split in two, it was easier to govern, but it led to political and financial crisis. It was also too hard for one leader to protect that much land from military attacks. With these lands being so close together, it led to many, many wars and many differences that could not be solved unless one empire went down. As previously shown in the map, the Roman Empire was an extremely large amount of land. It was very difficult to acquire that much land, and it could only be won through war. The large expansions taking place had major downfalls on the empire, such as lack of communication, resources, and defenders. The Romans were unable to communicate effectively enough with the country despite their advanced technology. There was also too much land for the military to stop every invasion, and this resulted in more attacks and civilian rebellion. Overall, the expansion for the empire led to Rome's despair. Political instability was a large factor in the fall of the Roman Empire. One example of this is the imbalance of the economy. Rich citizens were gaining land while the poor were left with nothing. The government was corrupt and didn't have proper election or laws in place. Many emperors were murdered with no price to pay, and anyone could become an emperor. As the decline of Rome began, emperors were in more and more danger, and nothing could be stopped with an incompetent government. The lack of a strong leader led to the fall in Roman civic pride and its empire.
Huns and barbarian tribes. The mass invasion of Huns into Europe in the 14th century inspired the barbarian attacks. As the Huns warriors rampaged through Europe, it drove Germanic tribes to the borders of the Roman Empire. The Romans allowed members of the tribe to pass through, but treated them with extreme cruelty. This created a dangerous enemy within their own borders. The Germanic tribe rose up in revolt, creating an army and eventually killing the Eastern Emperor. The barbarians eventually took over Rome, weakening the Western Empire. This map shows that the Roman military could no longer safeguard the borders as efficiently as they once had, nor could the government as easily collect taxes in the provinces. The arrival of the Visigoths in the empire in the 3rd century and their subsequent rebellions has also been cited a contributing factor in the decline. The Western Roman Empire officially ended September 4th, 476 CE, when Emperor Romulus Augustus was deposed by the Germanic king Odoacer. Loss of traditional values. The decline of the Roman Empire was assisted by the rise and spread of Christianity. Christianity was legalized in 313 AD and eventually became the state's official religion. Christianity replaced the polytheistic Roman religion, which took away the emperor's divine status and shifted the glory from the state to one sole deity. Popes and other church leaders began to take a role in government, further complicating governance. The heavy influence of Christianity ultimately led to the end of the traditional Roman value system. Weakening of Roman legions. For most of the Roman Empire's history, their military was a dominant power in the ancient world. During the fall, Rome was unable to recruit enough soldiers from Roman citizens. Emperors even had to hire foreign mercenaries for their armies. With a military force of foreigners, the Roman Empire had strong warriors, but had little to no loyalty to the emperor or army officers. Many of the barbarians who brought down the Western Empire were earning military stripes while serving Roman legions.
The Roman Empire was weakened by the split of the country, Christianity, weak government, and ultimately attacks and invasions. During the final barbarian attack, the Roman capital was taken, and for the first time in over a millennium, Rome was no longer ruled by a Roman emperor. Rome had held power for so long that when it was finally overtaken, it would impact the Western world drastically. The values and ideals that Rome established would live on, and the fall would be considered one of the most devastating points in all of history.